Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Eli Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side.
You said something about you've seen a little bit of the RBs Heart. So it brought me to this thought this feeling. After the first podcast came out, I got
Our first one?
Exactly, the one that I did with you last year. Not last year, half a year ago, in its release date. I got a lot of love, got a lot of positive attention, and it felt great. It felt great with the triggers that come with receiving attention that I had to work through. And after some time, I was left with a very big reservoir of emotion in my heart. And when I checked in with it, it was a ton of sadness. And the sadness was that the world and our community, we just want to talk about the light. And I'm so happy that we just want to talk about the light. That's what we have to be talking about. That is Messianic times. It's the light. But I felt that I was sharing a journey of a girl who got abused at a young age and a woman who got married and was addicted, marriage that had to stand up to the tests of addiction. And where was the compassion and the ability to look at pain in the eye and say, you've been through so much. I am so sorry you had to do it, and mostly alone. And I'm sorry we didn't create a world and a community or a family or a school cult, whatever it is, where you had to suffer in silence for so long. And it did a real number on me, questioning, is this coming from my ego? Is this coming from my soul? And the journey that I went with it was like, it brought me deeper into into this feeling of like, where am I supposed to go with all of this pain? Where should I go? I have things that I went through that I don't even talk to a therapist about. One, out of sensitivity to them. Two, this is such deeply heartfelt things. I'm not paying someone to listen to my heart and it just never felt right to go to certain zones or share certain experiences with them. And in the process of being so deeply pained of like, where is this world of compassion that we need? Like, it was just highlighting to me that the next wave of awareness that I want to be a part of is creating a loving, compassionate response to pain. When someone says, I hate God, not to say you're pained by God, to say you are in a place that's so dark and you hate God. And when someone says they were abused, not to say I'm glad you got through it, but to say, can I go there with you? What do you want to tell me about that? And to hold space for the pain. It kind of reminds me of, I was reading about like in some of the stories of the Baal Shem Tov, like I came across this story of, I think it was the Shpaler Zayda, where he would go from village to village and town to town to try to help people, and he never engaged with their spirituality before he checked in with their physical needs. He wasn't coming to offer them any Neshama lesson or any Torah concept or Parsha idea before he checked in with what's going on with your physical existence, because that's where our suffering happens. That's where it becomes so dark and so painful. Then I went on this whole, bend with myself of like, where is this coming from? Am I going into the dark around this? Can I just travel the light and all the compliments that are coming in? And today I hold that Hashem was moving me through that experience of the podcast's release. And it comes from a very deep soul place of this world needs more truthful compassion. My process with it was the RBs Heart, where I opened up letters of the Rebbe with this pain on my heart, and I opened it, and the letter that I opened to was the Rebbe was writing to someone who was finally granted the Iron Curtain fell, and they were able to come to America. And the Rebbe was writing to this person how he's just finding out about him and his journey, and you're so beloved to me, and what was your time like behind the Iron Curtain? And it felt like the Rebbe was telling me, like, I see you were behind the Iron Curtain, you were barely alive, you were fighting to hold on, and you come and you're out in the light, and how is it? And come and tell me, and I want to hear from you, and I hold space for you. That was the energy, like it was so validating. And also, and then I opened up another a book that I read to my children of miracle stories, and there's this sergeant of an Israeli unit going back to one of the earlier wars that Israel fought, and maybe it was the Yom Kippur War. There was a surprise attack. There was maybe 98 soldiers in this trench, and a surprise attack starts, and there's one religious man in this unit, and he starts to sing the songs of David. He's talking about God's goodness and praise, and he inspires the crowd to believe in God. They're completely secular, and he creates such an intense, he shares his faith with the crowd there so strongly, and they manage to ward off like a tremendous amount of incoming, attack. And 96 soldiers die. And, or maybe I'm wrong, I'm sorry. The 96 live. The religious man dies. They live, he dies. And this sergeant who's in charge of this mission, in the middle of this, he's inspired by this Dati soldier. He says, God, if we come out of this alive, I dedicate that I will put tefillin on for the rest of my life. He loses his arm, and this religious soldier dies. And after the battle, he's taken to a hospital to recuperate. And he falls into this depression and this what's God's ways? Like, what are God's ways? The one man that believed in you, you take, and the arm that I swore to you to connect to you, you take. And he felt so broken, different people were coming to visit him, and he was asking these questions to different leaders and he never was able to find serenity with this experience. And one year he's going to America to get a prosthetic arm, and a friend tells him, if you going to New York already, go stop by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And so he goes in, and he describes how he comes in, and the Rebbe invites him to share his story. And for 2 hours, 3 hours, however many, he explains every part of this battle. And the fears, the scares, the insecurities, the terror, and he shears his heart, and the Rebbe holds space for his pain so intensely. And then at the end, he asks the Rebbe, I have this question that I've never been able to find solace with. And he asks about this soldier and about his arm, and I forget the answer to what the Rebbe told him, but for me, it was like this, mirroring of this experience of the only one who wants to hear about our pain is the Rebbe. The only one who we can show up with to our true story is the Rebbe. And when will we be able to create? And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. At this point in my journey, I'm so excited to share good news. I write in upon of this. I've showed up with my husband's a sex addict, and am I allowed to write that to a Rebbe? I was abused like this. Am I allowed to write that to a Rebbe? But where should I go? With so much doubt on journeys, I wrote upon him. I would be like, okay, today I'm going to be able to do it. And I would take out the pen, and then from the journey, I would go straight to the aisle and bring my pan there with so much is that how you engage a Rebbe? Probably not. Maybe someone's going to tell me I'm not supposed to do that. But this is where I showed up for mine. And the point that I'm hoping to share is that we could be honest with each other about where life takes us for the most part. And if we could ask ourselves, am I a person that someone who was hurt in any way can talk to? And if not, why not? Why not? Why can't they talk to me about their challenge? Probably because they don't sense that I've worked through those challenges myself, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you want to create a more loving world, I guess it starts with yourself and being true to your story and leaning into your story so that slowly we could have true, authentic places to hold each other.
Amen.
Yeah.
So, you saw the podcast I did with Yoni Wiseman. It doesn't have to be. Yeah.
I heard regards from it. I didn't listen.
Oh, parts.
I got bits from Avi, from Esther,
Okay. Yeah. So there was a clip that was shared yesterday, which reminded me of the podcast, which I don't know what the question was that he asked me, but I said to him that I said, Yoni, we're 40 years old now. There is no them to point at. Like we are the them. Oftentimes you want to point at the others who created this culture that has toxicity or problems, and they did it.
Right.
And when we're 10 or 15 years old, we can point, but at some point in time we have to point at ourselves and say, this is what is it that we want to be different. So I hope that you're inspired and encouraged, not just do this podcast, but to keep talking and keep sharing and keep putting it out there, because the world needs to hear this, hear what you're preaching.
Thank you.
I was thinking also about, one more point on this article. In the article, maybe we're talking about the same one, but the one that I saw,
it's the same one because it came to me through you.
Oh, okay. Alternative modalities. So one of them was, they were attacking someone who has a podcast, Nechama Schusterman, on Nun Aleph and Nun Beis Sichos.
Wow, that's low.
What? And saying
that's
just
low
because
to attack her. Okay.
So I don't know her.
Okay.
I've heard very nice things, and it inspired me to want to talk to her. So hopefully at some point we'll sit down and have a conversation. We've lived through COVID, and I think COVID really showed a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And there were much more women calling out government tyranny, and it was true government tyranny. I'll just call it what it was. Much more women calling it out and mothers calling it out than rabbis. A lot of rabbis. We have to follow the government. We have to follow this. To what length and to what extent, right? When the mayor of New York shut down Jewish funerals and allowed for protests, and hundreds of scientists wrote letters saying that somehow an outdoor funeral has a different spread of COVID than a protest for a person who was killed, there should have been mass amounts of rabbis saying this is government tyranny. This is insanity. And they didn't. There were a few who were in there which popped up and said things.
Yeah, you're making.
And a lot of women did, by the way.
So my mom, you met my mom. She joined us for Shabbos at the shul. And my mother woke up to this truth of government tyranny. I think she said she shared that Shabbos like 30-something years ago. And I'm so grateful that I grew up in a home where you have to feel for yourself. You need to think for yourself. And she really gave me that confidence to, just because it is doesn't mean it's right. Just because, and she keeps on moving with the flow of life and pushing us into the changes. So she was one of those few women, and we need more. We need more of those women who stand up to. Yeah.
That's where I felt it was coming from. I felt there were a lot of mothers who said, "I want to protect my kids, and this is insanity.
Right.
Don't mask my kids. Don't, don't shut down the schools. Don't destroy them in the name of health, in the name of a lot of other things." And for the most part, what I saw with rabbis was towing the line and say, the government said a lockdown, we have to follow it. Okay, so push back against that lockdown.
I want to say something about
push back against counteract that message. The same way there were people on one side of the aisle who were able to get protests happening, the rabbi should have spoken about funerals and religious freedoms and whatever else they needed to do to fight back and change laws and elect different leaders, whatever was needed.
Yeah. I feel like in hindsight, you can look back at this situation and realize God was allowing for so much darkness to come into the world. And some people chose to wake up from the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Here, we're coming for your children. We're coming for your... And at that point, the mother said, no, you're not. You're going too far. And there are subtle ways in which they try to take a child or really deconstruct humanity became so not subtle anymore to some.
Yes.
And that darkness was really, really light for a lot of people. I feel like there was such a turning point for so many people to say, my life ain't going down that path anymore.
Right.
Like it was a real wake-up call for like the mother beer energy to come forth. I would love to see it in the men. I would love to see it in the men, because I always had a hard time with Yakov Avinu's response to Dinah being raped. Like, how does he criticize Shimon and Levi for showing up to the job in whatever way that they did?
Shimon and Levi were men, by the way.
Right. So they're brothers. I had a hard time. Where was the holy Yakov Avinu? What's his response? Like, there was a part of me that feels that there's truth and wholeness in what he did, but I can't see it. So why not? Why can't I? What's going on here?
What did he do or didn't do?
He condemned his children, and I don't know if he cursed them, but he spoke harshly towards them. And he said his response in the Torah, like after Yaakov Avinu finds out that Shimon and Levi slaughtered and took and plunged the whole city of Shechem, is like a condemnation towards his sons of like, how did you do this? And I think the attitude is, you put us all at risk now, because we are trying to go back up to Eretz Yisrael. We went to Haran. We're trying to go back up to our father, Yitzchak, and you exposed a little tribe that's trying to make its way, and now all the nations are gonna hate us and think of us as a threat. Because of my entanglement or my emotional reaction to the topic here, Torah's first true response to rape is a father not willing to directly hold it, and criticism of the ones who try to. That's how I read it. My system was very sensitive to that. Which, yeah, it's another tangent. And slowly with time, I'm softening, at least for today, there's the role of a father and there's the role of brothers. Everybody in this society carries a different role. Maybe a father is supposed to think about the long-term big picture of his family's safety, and maybe brothers are supposed to be so supportive of their siblings that they are the ones that could show up for their sister. And I know that doesn't answer the question of why did Yakov criticize, but for me, for now, like that's where I'm holding and making peace with it. But you brought up Nechama Schusterman and her Nun Beis Sichos, and I don't listen continuously. I don't listen to anything. I listen inside consistently. But she brought out something that I found to be so validating and worth sharing, because a lot of women who are working through addiction, they share this intense anger, like they're panicked that they have this anger inside of their body, and they don't know what to do with it. They're terrified of themselves, what's going to happen.
Anger towards her husband.
Anger
in general,
towards God, anger towards life, anger towards themselves. Just this very.
But specifically over this situation.
I hear from women who are struggling with this, not so much from abuse. Actually, that's not true. A lot of my friends. For right now, I'll
You're saying anger.
Anger.
They find out their husband is engaged in pornography or other sexually addictive behaviors,
exactly.
And an anger
and there's an
comes
anger
up,
there.
and then them wrestling with that anger, saying to themselves, "Hey, is there place for this? Is it okay for me to express
There's not even is there place. There's outright terror of the anger.
Oh, got it.
And I actually noticed this from all places for other people that I talk to. They're like, "What do you do with anger? What do you do? Like, what do you?" And I heard because the traditional information or teachings that we have on anger is that someone who's angry, ki'ilu ovdei avodah zara, and rhetoric like that, like anger is unholy, it denies God's reality, and it's off limits. You're not allowed to feel angry. What do you do if your heart feels angry? I thought I was defective, like your heart's broken, like you're some warped reality of a human because you produce so much anger, and we're not a human. We don't feel it. We don't have anger. Like, what's wrong with you that you have so much? That's how I felt. And in like traditional sources, I was just reading last week of like a very up-to-date teaching on, different cycles in life and the different energies of the month. And everything that was being offered on anger made me angry. And I thought it, to share this journey a little bit for these women who are feeling anger in them. To me, anger is a sign. It's an energy that God, gives us as one of the, the tools in the toolkit. One of the messengers that shows up is anger. And anger is there, and it shows up to tell you that something severe happened. There's a boundary that was crossed. There's an extreme lack of safety. Something feels very not okay right now. And if you can work with it instead of denying this experience, you will use anger the way Nechama explained it, which I'll share. And if you don't, what I come to notice is that you will become a passive-aggressive person. If you're not going to leave a clean channel for anger to be worked out in a sacred, holy, not b'chinas acharayim behind the back way, but in a godly manner, you will become a passive-aggressive, critical person who's hissing out dark energy at any chance they can because you're not giving it an exit point. So Nechama made this point using the Rebbe's teachings. She was teaching how the Rebbe shares that charan means anger. Charayna is God's anger, God's wrath. And the name is no mistake. God gets angry and we get angry because anger is a true reality. It's a reality that needs to be handled with a ton of caution. It could shatter your wife and your child and yourself. And when you're working with anger, you need to take, like a scientist, put goggles on, put gloves on, make sure you're not babysitting other people's children that day, or in the parental role of taking care of your own children. Give space for yourself. It's definitely deadly and explosive, potentially deadly and very explosive, but that's actually its true power. So she was sharing how, for the Rebbe saying that Yitzchak and Avram Avinu had the avoda of, we leave the dark, we leave what's broken, we elevate ourselves and we surround ourselves in light. We go into Torah, we learn Torah all day. First Avraham and then Yitzchak, like even more solidly. And then that, as much as you can leave the darkness, you will produce an offspring that looks like Esav, which literally is red, hairy, and angry, when you haven't worked out anger in your family and in yourself. And so eventually, Hashem feels that Avraham and Yitzchak, I'm paraphrasing.
Yes.
Avraham and Yitzchak have harnessed enough light and have put enough Torah into their neshama that they can now go into the dark. And Yakov is sent to do this avoda. The third generation comes to Haran and he stops before, right? And God protects him and promises him that he'll come out intact. And that's what he goes in with, this promise. And for 20 years, he lives in the land of anger. And he works with it, and he works on himself, and he deals with what comes up for him, and he gets tricked, and he gets lied to, and he gets manipulated, and he comes out with his 4 wives and his 12 children, almost. Some of them are about to be born, and he is able to exit this place of anger with his 12 shvatim, with Bnei Yisrael, come from this land of anger. And bringing it back, when you notice that you have anger in you and you say, God created this energy, there's nothing wrong, anything that that you feel God created, and you realize there's this fire that wants to move through your heart. It's explosive, it's huge, it's hot, it's fiery. And the message that it has for you is, I was violated, I was cheated on, we're living so far from the marriage and the chuppah that we set out on. And you listen to its screams and its energy, and you will hear this message of, how dare I be treated that way? How dare I surrender and settle on a marriage that's so devoid of God? How dare my child be treated from the school in that derogatory way? How dare there's a story that's telling you that you are being treated less than the godly soul than you are. And it could literally, I think these are the Rebbe's words, it could create tchias hamesim, the resurrection of your bones, We're all sleeping. We're half sleeping. And we want to wake up to this messianic era. We want to open up our eyes. We want to wake the F up. And if we will allow ourselves to be angry about the things that we deserve to be angry about and direct it in the way of our soul, this is our soul story, we're cheating on our souls. We're being gaslit that we're supposed to. And when a person will take this energy and they won't be afraid of it and they'll write that letter to themselves, I'm about to let anger flush through my system and it's going to move things. It's going to move mountains. And I want to put the parameters of, I might not be safe to go home to my wife in 2 hours, so I'm going to take a walk. Guide yourself. Use it as, I don't know, what's a powerful gun? I don't know, approach it as that. And in safe, healthy containers, let it rip. Like, let it wake you up. And Nechama validated that from these sichos, and I was so excited. I was so excited because my own journey, I was so shamed for being angry. And if you think about it in retrospect, like, all the shame belongs onto everybody else for telling someone who was abused, you don't have a right to be angry. You create a society where we can't talk about our problems. Then you tell us we're the problem, that we're too angry. And now where should I go? Okay, I'll go be a half-dead person because I need to stay alive and I need to be in somewhat level of a community. Until I couldn't handle that anymore, and I moved away from the community and I moved alone. And I let the anger wake me up.
Interesting. As you're talking, I'm thinking about this guy at Dhamma who came once, and in some way he felt like he felt very uptight, right? Like a lot of guys who come there, like it's natural, right? It's nature. You're doing breath work, you're doing combat fighting, and this guy was like prim and proper from the beginning, button down shirts and tucked in, and there was a certain intensity to it. And towards the end of the retreat, we took him through a process, and I forget what originated, what came from there, but it was clear that there was an anger behind it. So I asked him, I said, well, what's your relationship with anger? And he said, oh, I don't let myself get angry.
Right.
So I said, why not? He said, it's dangerous. And then he blurted out something about once hitting his kids and never wanting to do that again. So I shared with him, that, I said, I heard from someone that anger is not dangerous. Repressed anger is dangerous.
Oh.
Right? So when we repress it, it gets dangerous. And as we were kind of dancing with this, talking about it and seeing if he'd be willing to allow himself to go through a process to release some of that rage. And it's actually one of the reasons we talk about doing it all men's work, because when a man taps into his rage, it's important that there's no women and kids around.
Yeah.
Right. Even a lot of men, it's hard to handle that because sometimes there's deep, deep, deep reservoirs of anger within a lot of us. And the way men express it, meaning women also, but I'm saying the way men express it could come out in perceived as violent. Yeah. And it's sometimes important for them to know it's safe. There are other men here who can hold that, who aren't afraid of it. But one of the things we danced with back and forth was his idea of anger was expressed anger, meaning if I'm not expressing anger, I'm not feeling anger.
Oh, interesting.
As long as it was never brought out. So meaning, let's say we held true this idea that anger is a avodah zarah. Which part of anger are we talking about is so important to get rid of?
Right.
Is it the feeling of anger, or is it eliminating the expression of it?
Right.
Because the problem, and this is what he spoke about a lot, is that when he repressed it, then eventually sometimes it came bursting through anyway, because he wasn't actually treating anger as if it was something to be treated. He was only dealing with the expression of it, thinking, I can eliminate it completely.
Right. I think that's so true. The idea that when you notice anger in you, it's not something that you point outward with. It's something that you need to process inside. You don't come to someone and say, I'm so angry at you. I don't think, I'm speaking off the cuff. I think that before you ever approach a conversation like that, you would have had to feel and digest the anger in your own process, in your own system, before you come to someone. Otherwise, you could really hurt somebody with that.
Right. Have you heard of this concept of like primary and secondary emotions?
So, yeah. Go for it.
Yeah. So just the idea that there are certain emotions that come as an offshoot of another emotion. And there are some schools of thought that anger is not a primary emotion. It comes after a feeling of sadness or a feeling of fear.
It's a
And then in
cover-up.
response to that, then it's, now I'm angry. I felt afraid
Yes.
and I don't want to feel afraid anymore. So now I get angry at what made me feel afraid. Or I feel sad. I don't want to feel sad. And then I get angry at what made me feel sad. So one of the problems with not dissecting anger is we don't get to the truth behind it, which is whatever the sadness is or the fear behind it is.
I noticed that with my daughter very, very quickly, that if we'll be in a setting where she can't express her sadness, she doesn't feel safe to cry, within a few, I want to say minutes, but it's really seconds, she will be so angry. And it's this shield that comes up to hold the emotion in. And she doesn't feel safe to express and be truthful with the initial sadness. And so the anger comes to protect her and form this hardness around her heart to hold the other emotion in. And I know now with myself, in the beginning of my healing, there was raw anger. I would scream in journeys. I would just anger. Now, when I notice a angry energy on my heart, if I drop in, I can usually within a little bit of time, hi sadness, I could see the sadness hiding right behind it, or the hurt feeling that it's the dancing with, the anger is
Right.
coming to cover.
Yeah. I had this thought once that, if you think about, let's say there's, I don't know, a few people talking, okay, and someone gets angry, and then the expression of anger will usually, be a yell to kind of put everything, to put a stop to everything, right? So anger in some ways could be used as an emotion to block the flow of whatever's going on. So if someone's talking and saying something we don't want to hear, we can say stop, right?
Right.
And what that does is it stops the flow of energy.
Yeah.
And anger has that capacity, which is why it's so unholy, right? Energy is supposed to be flowing through. But the irony is then that to use the language of holiness to convince someone to then
Suppress it completely.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. And I would venture to say that God was so happy with where the conversation was going, and that he offered a way to go deeper with the individuals that were sitting there. And that if somebody is healthy enough to guide this anger and to go beneath it, you would maybe have a conversation that's on a higher consciousness. I stopped looking at myself as this faulty, wired system that gets angry because of weird
Mhm.
things. And I started paying attention that when I feel angry, there's something going on here.
Right.
And I go in and I see, I'm angry that the Rabbanim are pushing people who are on the fence of healing, and they literally have lives on their hands, right? And I move with that feeling, and here I am I was on the fence of coming here, and you made it very clear, I have to
Right.
come here.
Right.
I took that there was sadness. I'm talking to people who are desperate to heal. They are trying so hard to move through their marriages and move through their challenges. They're looking for a tiny bit of hope. And where are they finding it? In voice notes from me and friendships from some women who are vulnerable enough to be real with each other. There's this grassroots movement of quiet, especially in the Chabad Frum community, of how much love are we allowed to show each other? How much support are we allowed to? Yeah.
I hear it. Okay. I want to. There was one thing you spoke about earlier for a few seconds. I want to go there, and then we'll wrap this up. So you mentioned martyrdom and the concept of martyrdom. My wife is very passionate about this subject, so I feel like in her honor, I should touch on this. I should represent it. Yeah, I find her often when talking to women. She'll say things like, a good mother will also take care of themselves.
Yeah.
Right. A good mother won't allow themselves to be run dry in the name of being a good brother. Go out, take a walk, go to exercise, go to a beauty appointment, dress nicely. Don't always be run down in the name of being a good mother. So I wanted to get into the
So before I
martyrdom.
share my, where I'm holding with that today, that's very much in line with Freire's, view, healthy, holy view. The other side of that, of the underbelly of what that could look like, is there's so little child support. There's so little here, I'll say it differently. But I'll talk from the wife, the perspective of the spouse of the recovering individual. And I'll say that when you find out that your dear other is going through this battle, there's a complete lack of safety in this world that happens. You don't really have a marriage, there's nothing protecting you. There's no sacred energy that God says, this is one unit and you're protected and closed. The doors are ripped open and energy is moving through you. You're not making up that you don't feel safe. I literally was not safe. I felt energy. I became in touch with it. I felt other people moving. And so there's this, I have a husband who's not so attuned because they're still very disassociated. They're still somewhat falling on their coping mechanism. They're not very grounded and consistently in touch with life. They're pivoting to their coping mechanism from here and there. And so
numbing out, etc.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so how safe am I to leave my children and to leave the family's domain, that I could step out of here for a few minutes and know that everybody is truly safe? There's that. And then there's also like from women who didn't really put their husbands in this place of like, you betrayed me. They're like, it's okay, you have this challenge, I can handle it. But inside, they're so worried about how it's going. And so any extra resource that comes in the way of life goes to the husband. You go out, meet your friends. It's feeding into the martyrdom. But I see where it's coming from with myself. I was so desperate for Avi to be a safe husband that any little bit of, I don't want him to be sleep deprived. God forbid he could have a relapse.
Yeah.
And so I was waking up with the kids and barely surviving. And with my own healing, I came to a place of, okay, what's happening here? He's somewhat stable, Leah. Like you have to be able to trust God and pull God in a little bit more, that you have to be able to take care of yourself a little bit. And there was like this, I don't know, this restructuring of the resources that came our way where they were a little bit more balanced. But I would say for the first few years, or months, years, he has to be okay. The addict has to not be an addict. And so anything goes to them. And
well, you were in survival mode.
Survival mode. And in survival mode, the one who's less okay takes up the resources. Then you come to a place of realizing that you're in survival mode. And he has a lot of tools. And in all of this time, he has been building a healthy God. He has been building a healthy support system and everything that comes with, with the work. And slowly you maybe could find a little bit of safety to come start taking care of yourself.
Understood. So I want to remind you the way you referenced the martyrdom.
Yeah.
So it was that in the previous generations, let's say your parents, aunts, uncles, that in that time frame, we were living like martyrs, like that was viewed, right. And you seeing it as not the call of the moment. You didn't bring it up in relation to
addiction. Interesting.
Addiction specifically, because there I understand, right? It was survival mode. What I'm more interested in, like you're right, when someone's in survival, they do what they do, and whether that's someone who just finds out today about their husband being an addict, or 30, 40 years ago, the way many families lived with little money, tons of children, and just not that much community resources to support in any way. So people were in survival mode. No judgment there. It's just, what is the ideal? And the ideal is not the woman as Jewish martyr. So you touched on that, and that's what I was referring to. Not so much of what happens in specific situations, but the ideal.
So two things are coming out to me now. One is the relationship that we have to our bodies and to physicality and to Gashmias. And the other one is my relationship with Shabbos. So I'll speak about our relationship to physicality. The first sikha I learned inside after not learning inside for a while, the short brief is that there's 3 times that a chamar is mentioned in the Torah, or the Rebbe is highlighting 3. Maybe it's mentioned more. Avram Avinu saddles his donkey to go to Akedas Yitzchak. Moshe Rabbeinu saddles his donkey and puts his wife Tzipporah and his children on the donkey and walks into Egypt to redeem the Jewish people. And Mashiach is going to be riding on the donkey when he comes, possibly.
Right.
One of the realities is that Mashiach will come riding on a donkey. And the Rebbe is talking about these chamar and chomer are from the same root. And it's describing humanity's relationship to the physicality. And this is very important because this is the only realm that is a physical realm. This is the only Gashmias world. We are souls in realms above, and the only realm that we have a body in is this realm. And it's precisely this realm that God wants us to merge our soul and our bodies so that he can come and dwell in this place. He doesn't want to dwell up there with all the souls and all the good and all the... He wants it here in this physical world. So our relationship to the physical is what will bring about our redemption. And you could see that from the progression, right? That Mashiach will be riding it. He will have harnessed the power of the physicality. He will be using it for a godly purpose. And so I feel that in the last generation, there was this more of a maybe Tzipporah riding, like we're let's say Moshe Rabbeinu and Tzipporah show us how they were using the chamar. And the Rebbe said that we're not there, we're here, we're in Mashiach. We are supposed to be engaging in the physicality in a different way. So I think that we come from a very deep tradition of Mesiras Nefesh. It's what kept us alive. And I could see that, like every time you are Moser Nefesh, you bring yourself to the brink of life, God pushes through soul energy to keep you alive, right? The cases that don't result in death, when you push yourself to the end, God pushes for another level of existence. And so Mesiras Nefesh literally brings you to a breaking point, and if you don't break, you break open. I actually found that when Avi would share some of his, the more challenging things to hear, a certain energy would come into me. And I only had the awareness, I was swimming in an ocean recently, and I'm like, oh, that's what it was. I was going to break. It was a moment of Mesiras Nefesh. Where was this marriage going to go? And all of a sudden, this energy came in, like this. And I feel like it was because I was being brought to such a close breaking point. I also had this, after I had that, I realized, why do some people love stressful? They're addicted to stress. They're constantly brought, maybe even in the name of holiness, they don't necessarily feel their heart because they have so many walls up. But then when they push themselves to such a challenging, stressful situation, their heart, their soul is forced to come online. And like that affirms to them of like, oh, I have a soul, I have a God, I have a heart. It was very eye-opening. I understood a lot of people when I had that. But going back to being raised in a culture of Mesiras Nefesh, I think the first thing that was cut out was the externals, the superficials. The soul is the main thing. The soul is the main reason why we're here. Protecting the soul and Torah and the light is what has brought us here. This is what we stand for. This is what our mission statement is, so seemingly. And so that culture of I can do without so that a guest could have. I can do without so I can take care of another. My family could limit what we have. And I think that I'll speak for myself, raised in a culture like that, I very much believe that I could live with very, very little.
Well, could is different than should.
Eventually it turned into should.
Right.
It turned into, this is what your worthiness is, and that's how little or how much you're getting. I bought into that narrative, right? It wasn't necessarily, it could be done in a way where you see it as I could, but do I need to? When it feels or it's taught in a way of this is what we do, we martyr ourselves, we give away. And maybe this comes into the arrangement of what we see marriage is, the shared responsibilities of what keeps a Jewish marriage alive. Many people will say that they see this, the wife martyring, right? Where does this come from? Where their mothers and their grandmothers pushed and gave from everything that they had so that their husbands could be connected to Torah and they could learn more. And so maybe at one point, at one point it was a fight. There was a battle for that to happen. Torah was being threatened. And so their work was not made up. They had to fight for that. And women chose to be those righteous women and to rise to that occasion. I think what's going on here is that we have a generation who are saying this is the way it's supposed to be.
That's what I'm talking about, the ideal, exactly.
And not, right, I'm catching up to you.
Yes.
And not, we were in survival mode, we left survival mode, and now what could we see and what could we shift that would be more aligned? And
You're almost talking about the ego of Mesiras Nefesh.
I feel that in the last few years, generation or so, we're stuck in the ego version of it, but it wasn't always.
Oh, no, I get that.
Yeah,
no,
okay.
Just like anything else. Yeah.
Right. So I think that we're at the ego phase of that. And for that, probably one of the hardest points of Avi's addiction was me being mirrored a reality that said, this is how worthy you are. Like my self-esteem, my self-worth, and also from his, from where he comes from how a woman is treated and where I come from, it was mirroring to me like you're so tiny, and it not only in my head, like he can hold space for that today of how sorry he is for mirroring that to me. It wasn't just a projected experience; it was real. Where I am with it today, like if I move out, like what does Torah have to say about this? What's going on? I kind of touched on it a little bit when I shared of how I want to be treated, how I want to be courted.
Yes.
And I think that if people could shift a little bit and say like, not how has our family been treating women or how has our family been treating Shabbos, if we could recognize as a collective that a lot of what we do has been colored by a survival phase. And is there another way? There's the way we do it now, there's the ego's version of how it should be. And then there's this middle path of what does God want for me to have today? And however you choose to bring answers to yourself, if it's looking into Torah and seeing how did the greats treat their wives? What do we know about them? If it's a woman getting in touch with herself and saying, these are my needs and desires and wants, and owning them and working to be able to bring them to herself. I wonder if a lot of men want to treat their wives with more and don't know how to.
Yeah, sometimes it's don't know how to, could be part of it. And sometimes it's that women have a specific way that they're not receiving anything.
Yeah.
Women, there's like, this is the way to, which doesn't really leave room for that to emerge.
That's interesting.
Within a man.
So I would see that the woman is testing the man. Maybe we're speaking, casually, and this is not thought out. Like, what's if when a woman says, this is the way you love me, right? This is the way you celebrate my birthday. This is the way. Mm-hmm. And the man doesn't want to listen to that. He doesn't want to go down that path. What's stopping him? She's saying that this is what I want. So why can't you meet me there? Let's say it's within the budget and these are reasonable.
Right. I feel like we're going to a little bit of different conversation. You're saying that sometimes men don't know how to do it.
Right.
Right. And other times to tap into that, it's very vulnerable to receive. Right. We all understand that.
You can say that again. I don't think people know that, how vulnerable it is to receive.
To sit in a receiving posture.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very vulnerable experience because Like I'm open and I may not get.
Yeah.
Like what I may get good mixed with bad. Like anything can happen in this. What I think is less understood is how vulnerable it is to give.
Okay.
Because if I give and it's not received, it's like
Rejection.
whoosh,
Yeah.
it's it could feel like rejection. It can feel like all sorts of things. So often a man needs that experience of I gave something, it was well received, and then I'll give more and it's better received, right? Like kind of getting into that
Interesting.
that dance. And when there's only the hey, do this for me, which I understand, right? I'm married to a woman and I know that dance. That's the female side of it. From the man side is sometimes needing to rev that engine up of I took a risk, I gave, it was received well. I took a risk, I was received well. Like it can so I'll give an example, right, in my own life. So I don't know why this happened, right? So in general, men get the message that when courting women, don't show too much interest. If you show too much interest, you creep them out. Okay, that's the general message that men get. So you kind of have to
play a game.
But
let's just pause and realize what we're up against. We're being given rules in courtship. Let's start this off on a game.
Exactly.
Okay, this is what the good advice that we have to receive. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And there were times where there's a certain innocence or sincerity to my personality, right? And it was a time where that backfired, right? Meaning that I gave and it wasn't so well received. Anyway, for whatever reason, when it came to my wife, when it came to Frady, I was very open and I was trusting of it. I had a couple dreams about her just before I was planning on flying to New York to take her out. It was just whatever. I wasn't in an open space. And I reached out to a relative of mine and I said, like, what's the best restaurant in New York? And I didn't know much, I was working, I was making money, I was in a business, but I just worked. It's like, Harris, okay, let me go to New York. Where am I going to? And the general approach is like the message that I received, a lot of other men received is like a first date. Don't like show that you're semi-interested, right? It's like, hey, I'm leaving the gym at this time. Maybe you'll meet me there. Or you bump into some casual way. Like, don't show that level of interest. It could be viewed as creepy. In any case, that's what I did, right? Okay, what's the best restaurant? Number one. So I was referred John George and the Trump, whatever, some restaurant. And it happened to be across the street from Central Park. So I was like, oh, cool. I'll tell her that the date's at 7. I'll set dinner at 8 and we can walk around Central Park for an hour. And then somehow the idea came to me to have a bouquet of flowers on the table with a poem. And this was, it's also a very vulnerable space for a guy to be in.
For sure.
Like, here it is, a first date. She claims she didn't even know it was a date somehow, some way. Till this day, she'll tell you, I had no idea it was a date.
Great communication happening.
To me, I thought it was pretty clear. But I did express it as, hey, I'm going to be in New York on a business trip. Do you want to go out? And I'd known her a little bit through her brother. So she thought, okay, maybe it's kind of like,
okay, I get it.
Right. Oh, maybe hang out with you. She said, I didn't even know if my brother was going to be there. Like
wow.
I had, and not the point. But anyway, by the time it happened, I showed up dressed well, much better than I'm dressed now. A jacket, walk in Central Park, a driver, flowers, a poem. Right. Okay. So imagine that's not well received.
Right.
It's a very risky experience for a guy to go into. So it's not just on the receiving end, which is also risky. A woman says, okay, I'm going to go on a date with you. Where are you going to take me? Right. It's the woman doesn't know, right? She's completely subjecting herself to whatever the man has planned. But the man is completely subjecting himself to however the woman receives what he has planned. And then sometimes a man has to get into that, kind of baby steps into this process of, I took a risk, I gave something, it was well received. I'll take a bigger risk, I gave something, it was well received, and so on and so forth before he can kind of tap into that within himself.
Right. I love it. I love what you're saying. I'll play the other side for a minute. And I'll say that realize that just as you're 1 in a billion, I don't know, who operates the way you do, the way that you were giving is also 1 in a billion. How many men will you hear that story from, that in their first interaction with a woman, they were willing to show one of their deep chambers of their heart to, and show so much interest and put their heart out there, right? Can you
Sure, I hear.
Can you receive
Yeah,
that?
okay.
I feel that most men, I don't know what audience, this doesn't even, the cycle of what you're saying makes a lot of sense, that the woman should receive well, and we should slowly build up into this flow between the two. I almost wonder now, as I'm saying this, maybe this is a big gift I'll walk away from this podcast with, is the same way I approached the addiction as it's me and him against it. I can almost approach this specific chapter or this specific dynamic in our relationship of it's us against being apart from each other in this giving and receiving dynamic. Because when someone gives you something that's so far from attuned to your wants and needs, you can try to find a place in yourself to be open to it, so that your husband could build that capacity and that right, that he could build his confidence in his ability to give. Where was he supposed to practice this? Hopefully,
one is building confidence. Another is actually tapping into the desire. It's almost like a man doesn't want to access that part of themselves, because once we access a desire, then we access the distance from the desire, right? We access the gap.
I hear that
as well.
I like that a lot.
So a man is excavating also through the process.
Right. It's beautiful. I will say that I do meet a lot of women who somehow have managed to make it holy to not have. Like, the less fancy, their menorah, candelabra, like they view it as like, look how much I don't buy into physicality, and or it's like, look how much I've given to my children over the years, that I didn't take anything for myself. And I think that goes back to, like, is it possible to check in with yourself? Like, what are the Torah's values here? Because when you come into the Beis HaMikdash, it was, from the way I understand it, it was a beautiful marble, grand, luxurious, golden. The Kohen Gadol had with 12 gorgeous stones that shined and golden pomegranates, and it was a very wealthy and physical space to be in. It was capturing. And I once had this conversation. I'm like, who did God create a ruby for? Like, who do you think he created it for? Like, if it's not to be used in your journey as a Jewish woman, like, who was it for? Tell me. Like, I am biased to believe that the greatest things that God created were for the people who work the hardest to bring his name and his truth to this world. And if I guess I'll be bold and say that if you distance yourself from beauty and you distance yourself from wealth, like, really soul search to see where it's coming from, because to me, the standard is the Torah. And this is what I see. I'm holding a picture of Rabbi Simcha Mushka. So I feel very connected to her, and especially around Hey Teves, which is today. It was the only footage that I have, of the Rebbitzin, because she was being interrogated. She is on camera shearing her for the courts. Her right. So at some point, I accessed these videos and I watched her, and I was like taking her energy in and watching the way she conducted herself. And what can I learn from this? The other half of the Rebbe's soul, the feminine version of the Rebbe, like, and around that time, a friend shared a story with me that the Rebbetzin was hosting someone, and they said, I'm going on a date in the next time. And the Rebbetzin asked her, do you have jewelry to wear with your outfit? And she didn't want to tell the Rebbetzin no. So she lied, and the Rebbetzin pressed her. I hope I'm getting the details right. But to the point where the Rebbetzin gave her a piece of jewelry, costume, whatever it was, to wear on the date. And it really just, pulling full circle, what I did read up on the Rebbetzin from Chaf Shvat this last year, where the Rebbe said that 3 things expand a person's consciousness. Do you know this?
Not only I know, I got a letter of the Rebbe specifically about this, which I'll share in a little bit.
Oh, so you'll quote
Yeah.
me, you'll quote it better than me. And one of the things was beauty, living with beautiful furniture, a beautiful wife.
Kalim, beautiful wife, and beautiful. Oh man, beautiful wife, beautiful Kalim, and beautiful house.
Right.
Yeah.
Which was shared in honor of Rebbetzin Chaim Mishka. Like the Rebbe chose this specific teaching to come through. And then I heard this story about the Rebbetzin, and I saw her relationship to physicality. And I saw how she pushed people to really love God's world and his things, and to not view it as this. She managed to pull it into manage. That's literally what we're here to do. So she was. You could go ahead, share
Right.
the.
Yeah, so I'll share a little bit, but you know, you used you were talking about Mesiras Nefesh, and I said the Yetzer Hara of Mesiras Nefesh,
Yeah.
right? Which is interesting, but I was thinking about this idea. It came to me once on an experience where I felt like I was getting to a certain truth of something, and then as I did, it felt like too far and I was off. And then I kept having these experiences on different concepts through the journey that too far to the right and too far to the left, I was off.
Right.
And I remember I was talking to the shaman at some point towards the end of the journey, and I was like, wow, we're really living on a razor's edge.
Yeah.
You know, we're right there, and it's so easy. And I find like so many of us want this simplicity, like I'm just going to follow halacha, I'm just going to ask the rabbi, and then we're going to know exactly what to do. And what I was brought back to was this conversation I had with Eli Tauger. I don't know if you saw that one. So Eli Tauger is.
I didn't see the podcast. I just know of his work.
Yeah, so he's one of the foremost experts on the Rebbe's teachings, translating it and everything else. And in the podcast that I did with him, I asked him, what would the Rebbe do in this scenario? And he was like, far from me to know.
Wow.
Right. Like the one thing about the Rebbe was how unpredictable he was. It was, I can watch it. I can think he's going to come in a certain place. And then on Israel, he lands in this area. And then in the next issue, he lands in that area. And you can kind of think you know him. And then he's slightly in a different direction. And I was thinking about that concept also in regards to the Rabbi writing an article about modalities and something else. Like, what would the Rebbe say? Like, far from us to know. Far from us to know. Here's someone who's studied, like, basically spends his day translating the Rebbe's teachings, and ask him a question. He's like, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. He's too unpredictable. So it brought me to kind of like that razor's edge with things. So what I was, in my own life, I've romanticized poverty heavily. Actually romantic. I don't know. I would imagine how much better my life would be if I didn't have a car and I can just take the bus, and how much simpler it would be. And my date nights could be, I told my wife, like, I go to dates, let's go to a movie. We'll walk there. All right. Just like going up the escalator to a $12 movie, and we come back home, we spent $30. It felt so simple and nice to be able to
controlled, safe,
to do that, whatever it was.
Yeah.
I completely romanticized, maybe even still do, poverty. And a lot of my journey of growth has been pushing me to embrace more and have more. It was, for a while, I was, my wife went from pretty much since I met her, she's like, you're not booking your own flights, I'm booking your flight. Like, it really bothered her that I was giving away hundreds of thousands, if not more, annually to tzedakah, but I flew economy. And she's like, there's something wrong with this picture. And her and I had these fights over it. And I kind of, in my own, I was like, oh, you just want nice things and you just this. But after I pulled it apart, no, she was actually pushing, like there was some part of me that had to be brought to life. Anyway, in regards to this specific letter, so at some point in time, we were living in Miami Beach.
Right.
And we built a beautiful home there, like completely gutted a condo and put extremely, extremely nice finishings and finished it in a beautiful way, very high-end, very expensive. And as our family was growing, we were growing out of that. And I was about to, we're looking for different homes. We already had this home where we are now, but we're living here on the weekends. And this was a major stretch for me, and was like somehow, it's obviously very beautiful and comfortable and everything else, but it's not what it would cost in Miami. So this was a way kind of my wife pushing me in a certain direction and me finding a way that it's tolerable, but not too much. In any case, and I'm not even talking about the ability to afford or not, because those weren't my that wasn't the calculation that was coming in. The calculation was my level of comfort. Like there was one home that my wife and I saw. She's like, I really, really want this home. And I said, if it was given to me for free, I wouldn't want it. Like it had nothing to do with the money. I was just completely repelled by this. In any case, so we're living in this condo. It was beautiful, but we were growing out of it. So I had this idea to rent that out or sell it and get a bigger home. But a bigger home meant not quite as nice.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought a home. We did some light renovations on it, and we're going to move in. I put the condo I have for sale. I have a friend who's very connected to the Rebbe and constantly getting letters, and he's somewhat tapped in, right? Just some of those people who are tapped in without medicine. And one morning he says, I'm getting bugged, whatever he meant, right? Spiritually bugged to send this to you. I got it about a week ago. It felt like a letter from the Rebbe for you, but for whatever reason, I didn't send it. Okay, so he sends me this letter. Separate from that, a friend of mine sends me the daily chayenu of that day, which spoke about, I think, a person who becomes poor and sells their house.
Oh, whoa.
And it says, and if your brother should be poor and sells his home, then you should help him out, right? Like something where there, I can find it for you later. And the learning of that was that we sell our house, like when we become poor, something like that. Right. I don't know exactly, right? But something about selling a house and poor. Fine. Then I get to this letter, my friend said, and in it talks about how there are 3 things that expand a man's consciousness. A beautiful home, beautiful kalim, and a beautiful wife. And the Rebbe was talking to someone who was in debt, thinking to sell his house in order to resolve his debts. Yeah. And the Rebbe advising him strongly against that because it's going to reduce not expand his consciousness. So anyway, what I'm sharing here, kind of the nutshell of this, and going back to that razor's edge, is it's very easy to look at it and say, okay, we have poverty, right? We know that life, we're comfortable there, and that's the way we're meant to live. And think that on the side of wealth is all ego, is all arrogance, is all haughtiness. But no, they're very, very different challenges. There's the ego of poverty, there's the ego of wealth. And I'm saying it as someone who's romanticized poverty for a long time. In some way, I wish to have the simplicity that offered. And some of my growth has been to accept that that's not the way my life is meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that we get comfortable. It's not really that. It's if Hashem is putting a situation in front of you that would keep you small. Like we're always being pushed to expand. We're always being pushed to grow ourselves. And if you're looking to downsize, it's here the Rebbe is showing you like, and precisely where there's so much potential religious ego of I'm supposed to be smaller in this way. I'm supposed to, and I guess in the merit of the Rebbetzin, he's coming to tell us that it's not how it's done.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think oftentimes we have to really, really dig in to intention. Like, what is the true thing behind that? Why are we saying that? Why are we doing that? And then when we get to the attention, like when we're honest with that, then we can know what it truly is. But something can appear to be ego and not be. Something can appear to not be and actually be. And we have to be honest with ourselves. And I think also that it was so helpful for me for that journey. I keep going back to it because I haven't remembered or even spoken about it. I think before this is just like that dance, how careful we always have to be, how easy it is to slip too far to the right or too far to the left. And I think the other side of it is how like so many of us want this super simple life. And a lot of us, I think, try to go to what I mean by that is just, let me go to someone who's going to give me the answers.
Yeah.
Or I'm following what the Rebbe says or something, so everything is okay. But then having a guy like Eli Tauger say, but you don't know what he's going to say. Right. Like you literally don't know. Yeah. So are you truly open to the messages that you're going to receive, and then go from that and not try to assume that there's some easy answer. It's like, oh, I'll just go here and I'll do this thing and then I'll know exactly what to do.
Yeah.
Not so fast.
To me, the whole idea of using the physicality, buying yourselves beautiful things, this is separate from self-care. Like there's attracting wealth where you ask God to make you to help you become a keli that could bring parnasa and bring bracha in. And how the Rebbe talks about how that's so closely related to a woman and the merit of a woman that happens, which could trigger a woman in 49 directions, if not more. Like
right. By the way, your wife is as beautiful as you make her think.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is your husband is as rich as you make him feel.
Interesting.
So that's the other side of that podcast, which I didn't release.
Interesting. I hear that. I could push back.
Sure, you should want to, just like men push back on the beautiful one.
I'm not,
if one is true, the other is true.
Okay, they're for sure both true. I think maybe this ties in here. Like we're tangent.
It was actually what you said. I was affirming what you said. I wasn't contradicting.
No, I'm not. I don't find that you to be disagree. I love what you're saying. I think that there's so much beauty and so much.
You said it can trigger a woman in 49 different ways, and I was affirming what you said.
Yeah, okay. And I also believe to an extent what you're saying, and I could just share another perspective of wives who have been giving so much of themselves, and their husbands wanting to live very, very, very simply and not allowing themselves to become a keli to receive God's abundance, right? If they have a very intense trauma or whatever, it could go in a lot of ways, but I was saying something else. I was saying that a woman could be the source of her husband's parnasa. To me, it comes naturally for me that there's God in everything, and how in some places it's I don't want that, and some places I do want that. And beauty and gold and silver and garments, like whatever was in the Beis HaMikdash it's very easy for me to see how that's what it's supposed to look like in our homes.
It actually says, it says that the reason Hashem created gold was for the Beis HaMikdash. Yes.
Right. So it comes very...
And then we have the personal Beis HaMikdash, right?
We do.
Right.
Our home truly is our personal Beis HaMikdash. I read this past Pesach, a little teaching from at the end of a Haggadah. I don't know who gets the source of this, but the Pirush was saying that if Yehuda and Binyamin, he was choosing two of the Shvatim, and he said if they knew that the Torah was being written about them, they would have shown up to the mission with a lot more intensity. And I took that as a lesson to myself. Like, we're journeying, but do we realize what we're doing? Do we realize that we're journeying? Do we realize that when the Rebbe told us that our home is our Beis HaMikdash and that it is our sanctuary, and we should desire that and hold that as our standard and conduct ourselves in accordance with that. And it literally is your temple. I've seen this on journeys. My home is my sanctuary. It's my temple. It's where I invite God to dwell inside of. And it's so important for the love and the safety and the flow and the harmony there, because this is the container that's going to bring God or to a certain, the extent that it could be in. And I'm in service. I'm the Kohen Gadol with my husband in this service. It feels funny to think of. I don't think of it but I find it to be very real and very true. And I hold myself accountable on that level. That the Torah is being written about us right now. Cool. We are writing that Torah, this Torah Chadasha, possibly. Maybe not, yeah. But that's how I think that it's harder for women maybe to take care of themselves and to go to that appointment, and there's a whole nother set of resistance or traumas that are in front of that. I don't know if we've spoken enough on this topic.
Yeah. We mentioned the martyrdom, but I do want to say this because there's a subtle difference between a woman communicating to her man, what you're coming home with is not enough for me, and you're not you're not living in your true abundant self. So I'll give you an example. So when my wife first started telling me these things about, I'm not letting you,
Living.
you're not booking economy anymore. Like, this is insane. Can you just, can we acknowledge that you're giving money to organizations where the people who are working for the organizations are flying business class and you're flying, this is not self-respect. This is not holy. This is not good. It's not being careful with money. It's nothing. It's nothing other than you disrespecting yourself. And I first heard that as you just like nice stuff. And it took me once realizing that there's an aspect that, of course, she likes nice things. But in fact, when we traveled together, she was insistent that we get a nice hotel. But when she traveled alone, she would stay at her sister's house.
Right.
So once I opened my eyes to that, I said, there's two different things she's saying. She's not saying that the way I'm showing up and what I'm bringing isn't enough. She's saying, Ellie, hold yourself to a higher standard.
Right.
There's big difference between the two. If the first message is sent, where my belief is that all men are doing as much as they can do. And I know some people don't want to hear that, but they're showing up in the best way they could. There was one point in time where my wife and I were not in a great place. I wasn't feeling great towards her, towards a marriage. At the same point in time, I wanted to, right? I was working on it. And for a period of time, I was unable to bring myself to buy a gift. But I'll share a story. Maybe it's, I think it's fairly connected to this point. So just my experience of it. So after my very first journey, for a period of time, I had a hard time buying my wife a gift at the beginning of our marriage. I did it first, and then I guess there was something not well received. I did a journey.
Avi's going to love this podcast. All of our wounds right here. This is a therapy session.
I did a journey, and I felt this, I felt inspired to, actually not immediately. What happened was a couple days after the journey, we were just with our son, our oldest at the time, Samuel, and we're walking around and we passed a jewelry store.
Mm.
And I walked in and I said, started looking at different things, and I felt this feeling inside like I want to buy her something. And I said, hey, what do you think about this ring? And she's like, oh, I actually, I've been looking for earrings, not rings. So if you want to get me something, I prefer earrings. And it felt like my whole, just like whatever it was inside me just collapsed. Like that desire completely left me. It had nothing to do with the money or not. It just, here I was wanting to express something, feeling that, and somehow it just felt like it missed. It wasn't received. Anyway, fast forward a few years, and again, I ended up in this place where I was not able to. I guess gifts are very meaningful for me. So if it's coming out of me, it's coming from a deep place. It's not just like, oh, okay, let me just get something.
Yeah. I was going to say that when you give, it's very authentic to a certain place in you. And so when that's not received, it wasn't that you wanted to give a gift from your head. It came with a certain intention, and which I could understand and relate to.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So at some point in time, I mustered up enough courage to buy her a gift, but I didn't deliver it in the way I had other times. It wasn't like a whole date night. It wasn't a surprise. I just kind of plopped it down in front of her. What was pointed out to me was kind of the way I didn't give it, right? But at that point in time, me
and Freddie have a lot in common.
Right.
Me and Avi did this, I don't know how many minutes ago.
It's like, he didn't do it this way, he didn't do it that way. So when I went into it, right, into the experience, just for myself at this point, maybe she'll hear this for the first time. Maybe she heard me say something, but wasn't quite articulated in this way that she'll receive it. Maybe on the podcast, she'll hear what I meant by it, is that to me, that was actually the best I can show up in that moment. I was celebrating the fact that despite the fact that I was not feeling great in the marriage, I was able to dig deep enough to buy a gift. And it took like a lot, for whatever reason, this one, a lot of trial and errors. What I wanted, they didn't have. Then I went to a different place and they were closed. And then eventually I found something and I liked it and they flew it. It was just like a whole to do. But by the time I gave it, I didn't have I didn't have a poem to go with it. I didn't have a date night to go with it. I just kind of like, hey, here it is. And what was pointed out was what wasn't there, right? That there wasn't those things, when at the time And I think this is true for pretty much all men. We're showing up the best we could. Like we are always doing the best we could. And then when that's not received in some way, then we lose energy and we lose steam. And when there's a way to send them, when there's a way to receive it fully as that, and then at the same point in time, there's like, I understood that I didn't show up with the whole fanfare. Like I'm the one who set that bar, right? I'm the one who had a poem and a, right? Okay,
Yeah.
her ideas of romantic experiences come from me. At the same point in time, this one wasn't there, but I felt more of the emphasis on what wasn't there than what was there. The gift, I'll have to dig deep again in order to get that. And that's what I'm saying is that the woman does play a very central role in the guy tapping into his abundance and that feeling when he's showing up and delivering and saying, I got a raise and I worked so hard. And at the end of the year, they gave me a 10% raise, the company. And he goes home to his wife and he says, we're still not going to be able to support ourselves on that. It's like, boom, right? The likelihood that he gets the raise next year has just been decreased versus somehow balancing that too is recognizing like that's a lot that you did. Right. That's a lot. And the guy knows that there's certain things that are not there as well. And if it's planted into him is the belief that, and I believe you can get it. And I believe that that's still attainable for us. If the woman can do that for a man, he'll start feeling rich. He'll start being rich.
I like what you're saying. I had my own awareness and journey around how much men shoulder in this world. Initially I was more aligned with the feminist movement than not. Thank God I woke up. And I found myself, or God organized a breathwork session in my home where a bunch of men were there and me. I didn't know it was not going to be men and women. It was the first time that was happening. And I felt that I needed it, and I checked with the practitioner, and he felt okay to have me there. So I energetically protected myself, and I sit down. And they
there's a breathwork ceremony, all men and you.
Yeah, in my community, Parkland. And I think there was about 8 men with Avi, not a big crowd. And what I took away from that, and I expressed to them, was like I was having this deep wave of appreciation for how much men shoulder in this world. Like the masculine energy volunteered, was put into a position to be shoulders, to be walls, to be a roof, to hold, to carry. It's a giant mission. It's a giant undertaking. And I was looking around from what the men were sharing of like, what's their intention for being here? It was like, there's no safe place for them to just be, to unpack, to see what's going on from your job to your home, where there's this constant cycle of it's not enough. It's right. And they were coming to this breath work to just like, can I hear myself breathe and think for a moment? And I really was filled with this deep appreciation for the men in my life, for the masculine energy of Hashem, for the men in the world that volunteer to or are on this mission in the masculine energy of what that role entails. I'll share from the other side that when, for already a few generations, women have been living on very little because female martyrdom is so strong. It's very high. We're working against it. So women have been living on very, very, very little. And a lot of the women I know are working really damn hard. They are pushing themselves to be everything that their children and families and mothers, and they're really working. And so here they have like, oh, I have to go change the way I speak now. Like the way my language is not the way that's going to be supportive to my husband. I've heard this from people. Like they hear that you have to change the way you speak. And then their husband
no one has to do anything.
You don't have to, but they're desperately looking for light in their relationships. And they're hearing from women who come and say, when I started speaking to my husband differently, it opened up channels. And so you are thinking like, how that, how am I going to teach myself a new way to talk? On top of, I don't sleep, I don't eat, I don't exercise, where am I learning a new, my own answer to that for myself was I didn't have to teach myself a new way to talk. I had to heal what was blocked inside of myself.
Yes.
It's not teaching yourself a new way. It's going in deep. You have a deep desire to be a loving, feminine presence that shines forth, that speaks in the way that that builds your husband up. And you're not doing this from top down of like, let me start practicing with flashcards of what do you say when he says, you're not doing that. You're going inside to ask yourself, like, I'm a piece of God, and God is compassionate and gentle and supportive and loving. And so where is my part there? Like, I was recently at the ocean, and I stand before it, and I said, like, God, I know your ocean is gorgeous. I could see that, but I don't feel it. And I'm being honest with you. Where in my heart is that puzzle piece blocked? Why can I not feel your beauty here? I'm not lying to myself that this is beautiful and that this sunset is so gorgeous and we're going to take pictures. I'm done with that. Like, I actually never did that, pretended, maybe to myself on some level. But when I'm honest with, like, why don't I have that ability? I have all abilities, basically. I have all feminine abilities. And why isn't this one coming? I feel like so many women, they hear, if I show up to my husband, like, and they're already killing themselves for how much they sacrifice. And I feel that if we would not live by other people's standards of supporting your husband means you have a second job or you do X, Y, and Z. I don't know, some funny made up list of how to be a supportive wife, just like this funny made up belief that when you date your husband, you date another person, don't show so much interest.
Yes.
I don't know where we came across our value systems, but if we check in with ourselves of like, what does he truly, you're trying to give to him, you're trying to give to yourself, what are our true needs? And realize that you're not going out there to try to find something, you're going inward to reveal something that's already there.
I want to say something we said before, and then I'll get back to what you said. So earlier we were talking, you said that a guy who shows up in the way I did is, let's say, 1 in a billion, right? With my wife. Okay. So every 13, 14, 15-year-old kid who dated a girl showed up like this, the way I described. The only thing that was unique was that somehow for my wife, I was able to kind of reopen that innocent, untarnished channel.
That's beautiful.
But every teenager showed up in this way
Wow.
And what was unique in that sense was that my wife received it as well, because many don't and many haven't, right?
Yeah.
In some way, right? Every guy who shows, the worst thing a guy can hear is that they're creepy. It's like the worst thing in the world. And that's the risk when you show up too vulnerable and show up too real and show up too genuine, is that like, oh wow, this guy's so creepy, like he doesn't even know me, and he showed up with flowers and a
that's someone who's not living in their heart space.
I'm talking about reality. I'm talking about reality, right? So where did the average 13-year-old guy get this game of at 23, 24, 25, or at this point in time, my wife, I think I was 27, right? That somewhere in that, it was actually real life experiences that led to that. So what I'm sharing is just in that dance of giving and receiving is recognizing the vulnerability that exists on each side of it and making space for the other. It is very vulnerable for a woman to receive and have no idea what's going to happen.
Right.
And it's very vulnerable for a guy to give and have no idea how it's going to be received.
Yeah.
Now,
just one point that touches on for me, the boy that was 14 got shut down, right? Or he wasn't allowed to have a girlfriend, so this talent or this part of his heart never came online, or he got hurt, right?
Yeah.
This romantic 14-year-old, entry into love. And then you have halacha, which I'm recently getting on friendlier terms with in an intellectual way, who tells you that 3 times a year you buy your wife a gift for the Shalosh Regalim.
Yes.
And I find that the Chachamim Hashem, they were really protecting the marriage when they were insisting on, like, that this high holiday is coming. What is going on in your relationship that's impeding this receiving and giving energy. Like we can distract
Yes.
ourselves, we can party, we can work, we can overwork, but the high holiday is coming. And if I want to be observant in this way, if I want to hold this value, these are checkpoints for ourselves of like, let's check in with what's going on in this relationship. What do I have to own? What do you have to own? What do we have to do to move so that you could show up? And I'll say that's like, the ideal. That's how I see it ideally. On the bottom, on the, boots on the ground, I see a bunch of boys who were sent out of the home when they were 14 years old, and they've never seen their father give their mother a gift. And they don't even know that part of themselves. They've never been in a situation when their heart was that open and that raw. And when the stages of heart and love and courtship were developing, they were in a fully masculine environment and were away from home. And hopefully they were even being modeled this at home. We're talking about in the case that a husband shows his children, this is how we treat our mom, our wife.
Right.
And I find that there's like, you're not giving me because you weren't privy to that. And I'm getting hurt that you don't think that I'm worthy of it. And so how are we going to break out of this dance here? Of like, you are worthy and I don't know how to. And so let's go on this. Let's do this together.
Right. And in this dance, either party has the option of stepping into that vulnerable space and risk being a little bit hurt.
And changing the dynamic.
Right, and change that. So I'm going to give, even though I'm not guaranteed it's going to be received correctly, or I'm going to receive, even though I may get something that's imperfect. But there was something I wanted to say about, so when we're talking about, I said your wife is as beautiful as you make her feel, right? That concept. The guy is not saying, okay, I'm going to give empty platitudes to my wife in order to get her to feel more beautiful, and then she's going to be beautiful.
Right.
I think that the reason it's triggering for men sometimes when their woman isn't as beautiful as they would like is because it's on them in some way, right? And we're talking about in this specific, I gave an example earlier of someone who made a comment to his wife that his wife didn't very much appreciate about, certain types of women being attractive to him. So here is someone who is very, very attracted to his wife and maybe still is, but certainly when they met, that's who he was thinking about and getting, all the butterflies and everything else before talking to her and seeing her and, getting a message from her and everything else. Okay. So the recommendation is to tap back into that.
Right.
And say, instead of getting lost in society's momentary definition of beauty and then holding your wife to that standard while that's a airbrushed photo and she's just finished bathing 2 kids, and comparing the two is tap back into that feeling that you once had towards her and start nurturing that, and slowly something is going to change. When I noticed this there was a point in time where I noticed my wife we were dating at this time, but she was dressing all in black, always black shirts, black pants, black this, and it triggered me. And then when I thought about it, I realized it's triggering me because I'm like, I was going through addiction. I was going through recovery. The mood was somber, and so was her. She was like dressed like it was a funeral, always black and black. And then slowly, as I started coming out of that phase and started getting more accepting of my own, like not as afraid of my sexuality. The very first conversation I had with your husband was about the same topic. We're in recovery for addiction, but okay, at some point in time, like there's another person on the other end of this. Like we just want to shut off this whole drive completely. That's not what anyone's looking for from us. And I noticed that as I started healing in that way, suddenly, without saying anything, a white t-shirt was bought, and then a dress, and slowly she started dressing a little bit. And I said, hey, is there something I'm doing that's creating this for her? So it's not empty platitudes because the woman will feel it. It's, can we tap into whatever that was that inspired us to want to marry this woman at some point?
Right.
And she felt very beautiful to us, and nurture that. And then, and then it keeps growing,
right,
and growing and growing. And the same is true with the guy. At some point in time, this guy showed up in a way that made you want to date him again, and then date him again, and get and accept the invitation to marry him, and so on and so forth. That means at some point in time, he was delivering in a way that was working for you. And then who knows?
Right.
He got distracted. He started focusing on work. He stopped paying as much attention. And then the woman often starts grasping for straws and saying, okay, I have to get attention this way. I have to get attention in that way. And the recommendation is to tap into that appreciation and then somehow deliver it in some way, right? That the guy knows when he walks in the door and it's like, damn, it's another day that I showed up later than I promised I would. But he says, at this time I'm going to push to have my phone in my pocket for at least 10 minutes after I walk in. And if the woman can notice that and mention it and feel a real appreciation, suddenly something shifts in him and say, oh, okay, I did something. A guy is always sitting there trying to say, okay, like, who am I? He's working for someone else. He's working for, I want to say not working for another person. His motivation to do it is not his own. Men are okay with nothing. And our vacations, we want nothing. We want to sit in nature with nothing. Quiet. We don't want to read a book. We want to stare at nothing. This is what a guy wants to do. And then something inspires them to say, okay, I got to make money for my kids. I got to go to a job for my wife. My boss needs something from me. This other person needs something from me. So then we get off our lazy ass and do something. And we're always doing our best. And then when it's not enough for someone, it feels like the best I had at this point in time was to show up at 9 p.m. and keep my phone in my pocket for 10 minutes. But somehow that wasn't enough. Like the amount of men I talk to who come to the conclusion of no matter what I do, she's never going to be happy. That's probably the number one complaint of men in a marriage. No matter what I do, she's never going to be happy. So if a woman can help a man break out of that no, it will make me happy. And I also want more, right? But it will actually make me happy. If she can reinvigorate that belief that your giving can somehow be received by me, it can inspire a whole nother level of giving until you have a beautiful woman dating a rich man. And they're 20 years in, feels like a first date.
Amen. Amen. I like what you're saying. I'm thinking that I'm learning on this in this conversation of like how every action that a man puts forth is a form of giving, and to notice that and to appreciate that and to validate it and see it as real. And you can aspire to greater, you can want more, but to pay attention to the subtle gestures that are made.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that if a woman taps into that appreciation, then they'll nurture that.
Yeah, I'll say that in this, like, it reminds me a little bit of this this holding pattern that me and Avi were in of like, you're supposed to give first so that I can do something with it. Like, who's going to make the first move here? The woman is many women overworked, and the man, and they see their husband's potential. A woman really, she could really see where she has access to the spiritual realms, her heart, whatever it is. She has a way. Did you hear
me talk about this ever?
You did, yeah. Okay. You're welcome to.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
And I feel like when she's asking for something, often it's like this disguised way of like trying to move you into your potential. For me, that's I kept on pushing Avi to be more attuned. I felt that at certain points we could disassociate, and I kept on pushing for attunement. Like what's like be aware. Like, you don't need to be told this is what would be helpful. If you know this system and this family and our needs, you would just step in, and you would the two things that you touch would be helpful, and you wouldn't have to guess. You would and I think like beneath all of that, I'm saying like be one with reality, be one with flow, have your feet on the ground, be looking at life as it happens, and don't be 2 feet above it where like you need me to tell you what's happening here and break it down for you. Don't be in your thoughts, be in your heart space. I feel like that's really what I'm pushing for, and I've shared this idea with friends, and it's like it resonates. I think it will come back to men and women, especially in your audience, the people we're talking to today. They're working really, really hard. They're trying to heal from big things that nobody else in our community or maybe are touching on. So we're talking to two really hardworking people. If it's a husband and a wife that are showing up to this conversation, and the person who could step into, I don't feel big enough. I feel like I'm giving you my all. I feel like I'm giving this marriage and my children my all. But if God put me in this tight spot, and I feel like I'm between a boulder and a hard place, God probably sees that I have more, that there's more in me. And instead of getting into this tension and this struggle of I'm giving, no, you're giving, no, you step out, you see me as beautiful, no, whatever the dialogue is going to be, and say and pray that God, you see me as this expanded version of myself where I'm able to see my husband, where I'm able to receive my husband. Help me arise to that place. Or if the husband wants to say it, and say, take me to the part of my heart where I can help my wife out of this cycle that she's in. Like the person who's able to touch a deeper part of love than what is currently in their relationship, they could, and they'll get the credit. Like God's keeping score. They don't have to, it doesn't have to, the first person who could introduce a little bit more of heart love, like I care, I'm willing, I'll go inside, I will show up to the trauma that I had when I was 14 and shipped away and my parents barely, and I'll break down the wall of that part of my heart, and I'll bring more heart to this marriage, and I will show up to the things that I know happened to me, and I won't settle on, yeah, that happened, now let's move on. And I'll say, like, my children need my whole heart. My wife wants all of me. I want all of myself. God wants all of me. And they'll go inside and they'll slowly start holding space for their story and being the witness to themselves, the aid. And whoever can bring more love into this marriage, they'll move the cycle.
Right. And that is 100% true that either one could.
Yeah.
Because we're both in a dynamic, right? So either party could change the dynamic. And at a certain point in time, when a couple can access that truth of, I'm not being cheated on, right? The woman is not being cheated on. And by the way, there are many men who are cheated on as well. So when they ask, I'm not being cheated on, but our relationship
is being cheated of something.
Right.
Of
our relationship is being cheated on. Like we've co-created a dynamic where this is happening. And at the same point in time, we've now co-created a dynamic where somehow truth is able to emerge, right? Because there are many couples who keep this secret for forever. So in that moment, I had this realization once when someone was stealing from me in my business. And it was going on for a while, and I only found out about it after, I don't know, some period of time. And I thought it was a bad day. Like I was like, what'd I do? Why was I?
Right.
Like I felt like I was in some moment of bad luck. And then it hit me a couple days in dealing with this. It's like, no, this is good.
That was your good day.
Yeah, the stealing's been going on for who knows how long. And now I found out about it.
Right.
Today's a good day.
Oh.
Right. So in the same way that I'm saying this couple has co-created a dynamic of cheating, well, we've also co-created dynamic of honesty that now it's coming to the surface.
Yeah.
And that's not happening for everyone.
Yeah.
So many people feel very alone in dealing with this, but what are they alone in dealing with? The truth of their marriage. Many people are not.
Yeah.
Right? And in your letter to sex addiction, right, you thanked it for bringing things to the surface that were there. With or without the addiction, there was a gap in the relationship, and the addiction highlighted the gap and forced you to say, okay, either I'm running or I'm dealing with it.
Yeah.
And fortunately, in each of our marriages, we made the decision to deal with it. And either one can choose to change the dynamic. So I spoke about, the dynamic of the guy giving and the woman noticing. And then on the flip side is very similar to what you said I've experienced, is that the woman is bringing something to the surface inside of the man that's necessary for their evolution. Like the woman is tapped in consciously or unconsciously or super consciously into their man's specific mission. David Data talks about, David Data?
No.
He's he has a book called The Way of the Superior Man. Each chapter should be its own book.
Okay.
This book, The Way of the Superior Man. So one of the topics he talks about is like the classic, the nagging wife, right? So like that's like almost like if a movie is made, has about, sometimes in sitcoms you have like the husband who comes home and
characters.
The woman, right? Characters. So that dynamic is often the man is being prepared for how to penetrate the world with his love, right? But he's not landing with his own woman, right? So the man is out there and wants to change the world and wants to change the world positively, but in his own home, he's not landing.
Right.
And the woman is saying like, okay, you want to be ready for the world? You want to be able to penetrate the world with your love? Penetrate me with your love, right? You're not landing for me. I'm not receiving you. I can't access. This is not who I believe you to be. And so many men say, oh, like at work they respect me, but my wife doesn't respect me because she knows you and she knows this isn't you. So it can be perceived as a nagging, or it can be perceived as an understanding that there's something more. You can fool them, but you can't fool me. I know there's something greater inside you. And if a man can start interpreting those experiences as a higher calling of sorts, then they can break the chain. They can break the chain as well.
I love that.
I was dealing with a lot of anger in my relationship for a period of time. And this was while I was doing medicine, while I was doing experiences, breathworks, everything. And for whatever reason, it took me like 3 times to have that same experience where I went into an experience extremely angry towards my wife. And then something got resolved inside. And I realized inside the journey. And I was like, oh, thankfully it was like, now that I got it, I was like, oh, imagine she listened to like what
Your
I was
argument.
angry about.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Imagine she got fooled by it, and then I would have lost the opportunity to have this amazing experience. And I interpreted the anger after 2 times as I'm angry that she's forcing me to do my work and not willing to do something that can just allow me to escape it. Like that's what I was angry about. So eventually it was, let's turn it inward. What is this higher calling of the message behind it? My biggest fight with my wife and I before we got married was we went on vacation to this place in Italy. And I decided, I didn't poll everyone. I decided that everyone was there because it was their honeymoon or 10th anniversary or some special occasion. And we were there because it was Tuesday. And, my wife had planned the trip. Right? I'm embarrassed to say. My wife had planned the trip. And I kept saying to her when we got to this hotel, I said, I don't understand. We're here because it's Tuesday and they're here because it's their 10th anniversary. And I had some basis, like the first person I asked said it was their 10th anniversary, but I didn't poll everyone there.
Yeah.
And then I decided that she's like trying to drag me into some life of, I don't know what. And a good life is one that doesn't have this extreme lavishness, whatever else. And then slowly realizing that no one's talking about waste or anything else, but my life, my purpose is meant to, at least for the moment, have this expansiveness and this abundance. And she was pushing me into that versus me just getting angry at it and deciding what was right or wrong, right? Angry at the message was right or wrong. So the invitation is really to either one. Whoever wants to step out and break the dynamic could change their marriage.
I find, thank God she didn't listen to your argument back then, right? And you got pushed to this place where you had to go and resolve it, and you come to this truth of she had a certain intuition that she was trying to move through. The tools along the way that have been extremely helpful for me and Avi have been the cold plunge and rape on his end. Maybe a little bit on my end too, where like we can get into this. I don't like to let things sit open for too long. I like to lean in and so we can come to this lack of clarity moment. And I could say, I feel it's that you can be doing, or right, let's say in this argument, and he'll say, no, it's because I did this, or you could have, whatever it is. And like tools that have been very helpful to keep our egos from being able to gaslight each other for too many days and create a very dark energy. We're like, let's go break this quickly. Like, go pause it. And I'm happy to hear what your inner child has to say about this, but just going at it from our ego, from like, I'm so loyal to my feelings and I'm going to keep on insisting it and I have no room to hear his feelings.
Right.
I'm very grateful that he has been willing to show up to that work and get in the cold plunge, 10 p.m., no matter what time it is. And he'll like have that reckoning with himself of like, what's going on here? Like, and show me what's going on for me, or show himself what's going on for himself. It's
Right.
been very helpful.
Okay, let's tie it all together. We've spoken for a while. We've spoken about, we know where we started, about couples who are in that process of recognizing that we're specifically talking to women, recognizing that their husband has been struggling with addiction. From there, we went to many different areas. Bring it home for us.
Bring it home. The way that I'm bringing this home for myself is the timing of this recording is the 5th of Teves, which is the Rebbe's Dida Natzach. And what I'm told is the Rebbe's Yom Tif. Every Rebbe had his Yom Tif. Hey Teves is the Rebbe's day. And the slogan of the day is Dida Natzach. We will be victorious. Or I don't know what Didan means, but Netzach. Yeah.
I think that's what, I think so. I've made the mistake of translating something, think I know what it means, and then being corrected afterwards.
It's okay. We get to do that in life. We get to make mistakes. It's a new phenomenon that I'm teaching myself and my kids in the last few months. Like anytime me or Avi will like spill something or break something, like my daughter will be like, it's okay, you're allowed to make mistakes. Where I'm allowed to. It's a new awareness that I give myself. I get lost and I detoured out of ways at 11 o'clock. I'm allowed to make a mistake. I'm not being hard on myself. But Netzach is this energy of perseverance, of victory, of what else do you know about Netzach? What comes to you?
Endurance.
Yeah. And Avi's birthday is Netzach Shebenetzach. He has a Sphira day. And so
what's his birthday?
Yud Iyar.
Oh, cool.
And in the counting of the Spheros, we say Netzach Shebenetzach. And at some point in my journey, I drew a lot of strength, and I'm married to a man who has been prepared by God for this journey, that he will endure and we will endure. And there's endurance in him and in our marriage that we will come to see the good of Hashem in the land of the living in this world. And so to be invited and where it lands on Hey Teves is like, to me, it feels like the Rebbe is giving me this hug. And we're celebrating this day together of a victory. And it feels like a very, very deep victory because from my perspective, Avi, the first episode that Avi did with you was titled, I think, The Battle of Our Generation.
Yes.
The fight of our generation. And that's how I feel. I really, truly feel that when we're being honest with ourselves, it all comes back to life force energy and death force energy. And that is sexuality. We're constantly engaging with things that are giving life or taking away from life. Tanya, breaks it up very beautifully for us of what does and what doesn't. And it really feels like a true victory to be able to come here and think back to a time in my life when I was completely paralyzed from this addiction and from the shame and the secrecy and the privacy that it naturally demands. And to be here today, to be able to talk about it and ear it out and approach it from different angles, it really truly feels like a very big victory. And it validates to me that this is the work of redemption. This is the work that we will bring ourselves into a messianic time that the Rebbe envisioned for us.
Amen. I should say, I don't know which my birthday is, either Netzach Sheb Tiferes or Tiferes Sheb Netzach, but
there's
I'm
a
pretty
Netzach
sure.
in there.
I'm 99% sure. I want to say, okay, it's not important, but one or the other.
Between the two of us holding Netzach and this day being a day of Netzach, I hope that anybody listening and anybody on this journey knows that they're being supported and we're here to share this endurance. I'm here to share this energy of endurance that comes through me, that comes through my portal to shine for anybody who is working through this. It's fierce.
Oh, so I'll tell you what came to me as you were speaking, and I was thinking about, kind of putting it all together, is that we spoke about kind of the extremes in the breakdown of a marriage. And then we also spoke about what could be perceived as benign subtleties, a gift that's not
Yeah.
well received,
Yeah.
kind of the extreme, and to see the big in the small and the small in the big, in the sense that the couple who's struggling with the very extreme can feel like I'm the only one.
Yeah.
And really, all marriages are work. All marriages, we're trying to, I often say it would be hard for me to get along with the version of me from 2 years ago. Right. So, how am I going to get along with a completely different human being? It's hard work.
Yeah.
And it does take hard work. And even though we can feel very alone in dealing with the very extreme examples of marriage breakdown, know that it's not too dissimilar than your friend telling you they got a gift they didn't like from their husband, or they haven't got a gift in a year. And then the flip side of it is the bigness in the small things, meaning some of us wait until a marriage breaks down to the point of cheating to pay attention to the fact that there's a divide here. I really liked what you said about that 3 times annually tapping back into that space of giving and receiving. I'm willing to give and receive, because sometimes we can hear it as, okay, I'm going to do an action. But it says, I think I heard it from Yakov, it says, tzaddik b'emunasai tichya, which means that a tzaddik lives by his beliefs, that his beliefs and his actions are the same. Sometimes we can say, food coloring is not healthy, but we eat food coloring. Or we say, I really believe, I really believe in Hashem, but yet we're panicked whether this deal is going to go through or not going to go through, right? But tzaddik b'emunasai tichya, his beliefs and his actions are one and the same. So if someone is giving a gift, then they're feeling the giving energy.
Right.
They've tapped into that once again. So to me, kind of the connection between what we discussed is to see that, hey, when there are those small breakdowns in marriage, that there's a gift I want to bring, but I'm not. You're really on the same spectrum as the person who's full on cheating.
I think that
and pay attention to it. Look at it. Put that under a microscope.
The higher you go in your consciousness, the higher you go in your connection to Hashem, the little things really, really matter. And so the gift in a couple's relationship where there is enough safety and there is enough sacredness, right? And so the arguments and the mirrors that you now have seem so much smaller and more subtle. And you can say, oh, like that's not a big deal. But those are your vantage points. You've already, for now, thank God, you have the foundation on the ground. And this is where you can see what's going on in your masculine, feminine, divine connection that's happening. I also know for myself that, and from a friend who's like, what's the big deal? It's just a gift. Like she's going through that dynamic where she's struggling to receive. And I hear her trying to her ego is trying to protect her from going there by saying it's why are you making a big deal? Let it pass. The waves will come, life will move, and we'll be past this. Don't go in. And I hear her downplaying the situation so she can try to not have to face whatever hurt is underneath that experience And I know also for myself that the day in therapy that I hit the mother load of my work and my trauma was the day that I said, it wasn't conscious. I took 10 or 15 minutes. I'm going to talk about something vain for a minute. Something's been bothering me about myself, and it's not directly the work, and it's vain, and I don't even know I am doing this, and it's come on.
Right.
And I went down that path, and I had a journey sober. I accessed places of myself that were hidden so beautifully under the klipa of martyrdom and under the klipa of we don't need that. We're above that. That doesn't bother us. And the truth is that we need our wholeness. We need our everything. We need our we need the gifts and we need the safe marriage. And that's what I feel like, that's what this concept that we're talking about, vacations and poverty and wealth. It's like the Rebbe pushed for a very, very big presence, because that's who we are. We are big. We're big. We have to be playing big if we're going to be in alignment with our truth.
Oh. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming out. I hope you keep doing this, whatever that means for you.
I mean,
But whatever, stretching out and putting your out of your comfort zone and putting your voice and your messages and your hard work out for others to see and be inspired by. I hope you don't stop here.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.